fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The air in my citadel always tasted of ozone and old power. A scent I had grown so accustomed to it was like breathing nothing at all. For a century, challengers had come, drawn by tales of the Witch of the Iron Peaks. They brought their best spells, their most potent artifacts, and their foolish, fleeting bravado. Every one of them had ended up kneeling in the scorched dust of my throne room, their magic unraveling before it ever reached me, their wills broken against mine. So when the two of them appeared at my gate, unannounced and unimpeded by the outer wards, I was more bored than intrigued. One was broad and brash, all sun-bronzed skin and swagger, his chin tilted with an infuriating confidence that promised a swift and satisfying humiliation. The other stood a pace behind, quieter, his presence a steady, watchful shadow that absorbed the light. It was the first one, Kael, who spoke, his voice echoing in the cavernous hall. "So if I understand correctly, you are protected against my magic." He gestured dismissively at the shimmering wards that clung to my skin like a second gown. A low chuckle rumbled in my chest, a sound of disuse. "That is a simplistic way of putting it, little man. My will is the only law in this mountain. Your magic is less than meaningless here." He grinned, a flash of white in his handsome face that did nothing to move me. "Exactly which, and your spells will have no effect on me." A flicker of interest. No one had ever made such a ludicrous claim. I raised a hand, bored of the chatter, and a bolt of pure, white-hot energy, a force that could crack mountains, shot from my palm. It slammed into him and did nothing. It simply dissipated against his skin like steam against hot iron, leaving not a single scorch mark, not a single singed hair. The quiet one, Rorik, didn't even flinch. My breath, which I had not realized I was holding, caught in my throat. For the first time in decades, I felt a jolt of genuine, world-altering surprise. "Interesting," I said, the word a low purr that echoed in the sudden, ringing silence. My blood began to hum with a forgotten warmth. Slowly, deliberately, I began to roll up the sleeves of my tunic, revealing arms corded with the hard, dense muscle born from a lifetime of smithing enchanted steel and wrestling with raw power. "You might actually be a decent challenge then." Kael's grin widened, but his eyes, for the very first time, held a flicker of uncertainty as he took in the sheer physical power I displayed. Rorik's gaze, however, was different. It wasn't on my arms, but on my face, intense and unnervingly analytical, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle he'd only just discovered. A slow, predatory smile touched my lips. I looked past Kael, my eyes locking with his silent shadow. "But why settle for one challenge when I can have two? You both came to my mountain. You will both face my terms." My terms were not what they expected. I led them not to an arena of magical combat, but deep into the mountain's heart, down spiraling staircases that descended into blistering heat. The air grew thick with the scent of coal smoke, hot iron, and something else, the metallic tang of their own sweat. We arrived in my personal forge, a vast cavern where the rhythmic clang of my enchanted hammer was the only music I had heard for years. Heat washed over us in suffocating waves, making the sweat bead on their brows and cling to their shirts. I watched Kael's gaze sweep over the racks of weapons I had forged, each blade and axe head humming with a sliver of my own indomitable power. "The challenge is simple," I announced, my voice easily carrying over the roar of the fire pit. "You will help me forge a new blade. You will haul the ore from the deep veins, you will work the bellows until your lungs burn, and you will quench the steel in your own sweat if you must. You will match my strength and my endurance from dusk until dawn." Kael scoffed, wiping a forearm across his damp brow. "A blacksmith's work. We came here to fight a witch, not to be your apprentices." I turned, my own body already slick with a light sheen of perspiration, and picked up a massive ingot of raw star iron as if it were a loaf of bread. "My magic is useless against you, and yours is useless against me, so we will compete with this." I tossed the ingot onto a massive anvil with a deafening clang that made the very floor vibrate beneath their feet, with muscle and sweat and will, unless, of course, you are afraid. His jaw tightened, the insult landing exactly as I intended. The challenge to his pride was one he couldn't ignore. "Fine." It was Rorik who spoke next, his voice a low baritone that seemed to absorb the forge's heat rather than fight it. "We accept." Throughout the long night, the contest unfolded. It became a grueling dance of strained muscles and forced, intimate proximity. To move the heavy crucible of molten metal, we had to stand shoulder to shoulder, my bare arm brushing against Kael's, his skin shockingly hot and solid. I felt the coiled tension in him, a raw, kinetic power he held in check. But it was Rorik I found my eyes drawn to. He worked with a quiet, efficient grace, his movements precise where Kael's were explosive. At one point, Kael stumbled while trying to position a glowing blade on the anvil. I moved in an instant, my body pressing flush against his back to steady him, my hands covering his on the tongs. A tremor went through his powerful frame, a sharp intake of breath hissed past my ear. The heat between us suddenly had nothing to do with the forge. As I held him there, my gaze lifted and met Rorik's across the shimmering flames. He was perfectly still, watching us. There was no anger in his eyes, no jealousy. There was only a dark, consuming hunger that mirrored the one I suddenly felt awakening like a slumbering dragon deep inside me. He knew. He could feel the current passing between me and his brother, and it did not repel him. It drew him in. The challenge of the forge bled into a second day, then a third. The lines between contest, cooperation, and something far more complicated blurred into a haze of exhaustion and sweat. We fell into a rhythm, the three of us. The clang of the hammer was our shared heartbeat, the roar of the fire our communal breath. The initial antagonism from Kael had softened, hammered out of him by the grueling labor and replaced by a grudging respect. It was coupled with a simmering physical awareness that thickened the air every time I moved near him. He watched the flex of muscles in my back as I heaved the hammer. His eyes traced the line of my arms as I guided a glowing blade. I felt his gaze like a physical touch, a heat that licked at my skin and coiled low in my belly. But the true mystery, the quiet storm, was Rorik. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were insightful. He asked about the linguistic roots of the runes I carved into the blades, about the theoretical balance between quenching speed and molecular integrity. He was not just a warrior, but a scholar. I began to single him out, drawing him into conversations that were for him alone, asking his opinion on the alloy's balance, guiding his hand as he learned to temper the steel. His fingers were calloused, but his touch was surprisingly gentle, sending an unexpected shiver through me. One evening, a me-struck hammer blow by a weary Kael sent a shower of sparks raining down. One caught Rorik on the forearm, leaving a deep, angry burn that hissed on his skin. My hands instantly went to him, the century-old instinct to weave a healing spell rising like a tide, but I stopped, my fingers hovering uselessly over the wound. Magic wouldn't work. My frustration was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. "Come," I said, my voice softer than I had heard it in years. I led him from the forge's glare and Kael's suddenly watchful eyes into my private chambers. I cleaned the wound with cool water and dressed it with a salve of mountain herbs. As I worked, my fingers tracing the heated skin around his burn, the silence was heavy with unspoken things. His closeness was intoxicating, a scent of leather, steel, and a clean, masculine scent that was uniquely his. He was watching my face, his dark eyes intense. This close, I could feel the steady, powerful beat of his heart, a rhythm that called to something primal and long dormant within me. He was so much more than Kael's shadow. He was an anchor, a deep and quiet strength that I found myself wanting to lean into. The air crackled, charged with a new kind of power. Slowly, he reached out and caught my wrist, his thumb stroking over my pulse point, feeling its frantic rhythm. The simple touch sent a shockwave through my entire body. "He's not the only one you have no effect on," Rorik murmured, his voice a low growl that vibrated through his hand into mine. His gaze held me captive, fierce and raw. "I see you, Alara, not the witch, not the legend. You." The door to the chamber crashed open. Kael stood there, silhouetted by the forge light, his face a mask of stone. "What is the meaning of this?" Kael's voice was dangerously quiet, but the forge fire roaring behind him seemed to reflect in his eyes, turning them to molten gold. I did not pull my hand away from Rorik. In fact, his grip tightened possessively on my wrist, a silent challenge to his brother. I met Kael's furious stare, my chin high. The time for games, for tests of strength, was over. "The meaning," I said, my voice steady and clear, "is that the challenge has changed." I rose from my kneeling position, moving to stand between them. The space already charged by my intimate moment with Rorik now hummed with the combined, explosive tension of all three of us. "You came here seeking to test your immunity against my power, a novelty, but this connection between us, it is a power all its own, one I have no intention of ignoring." Kael's fists clenched at his sides. "He is my brother. You will not play us against each other like pieces on a board." "Look at me, Kael," I commanded, my voice softening slightly. "Do you honestly believe this is a game to me? I have spent a century alone on this mountain, untouched, unchallenged, and profoundly bored. You two arrive, and for the first time I feel something. With you," my eyes met his, "I feel the thrill of a physical equal, a fire that matches my own, a strength that does not break against me." My gaze shifted to Rorik, who had risen to his feet, his injured arm held carefully at his side, but his posture radiating an unshakable calm. "And with you I feel a quiet understanding, a meeting of minds that I did not even know I was starving for. You see the woman, not just the witch." The silence stretched, thick and heavy with unspoken history and uncertain future. I had laid my truth bare, a vulnerability I had never shown another living soul. Rorik was the first to move. He took a deliberate step forward, closing the small distance until he stood beside me, a silent declaration of allegiance. He looked at his brother, his expression unreadable but his voice firm. "She's not playing us, Kael, she's seeing us, both of us." Kael's eyes darted between me and his brother, a storm of emotions warring on his handsome face. Anger, betrayal, confusion, and beneath it all, a deep-seated longing he had tried to mask with arrogance. He had wanted to conquer the Witch of the Mountain, but he had not expected to be seen by the woman. With a shuddering breath that seemed to wrench itself from his soul, the fight went out of him, leaving him looking lost. I don't understand this. Neither do I admitted, my voice a near whisper. But I want to. I reached out my free hand, hesitating for only a moment before I laid it on Kael's rigid arm. His muscles were like steel beneath my touch, but he didn't pull away. And so we stood, a triangle of impossible want in the heart of the mountain, bound by a force more potent than any magic. The challenge was no longer about spells or steel. It was about forging something new from three disparate, powerful elements, a blade with three edges, stronger and sharper than any I had ever crafted alone. The fire in the forge burned low, but here, between the three of us, a new and far more dangerous one had just been kindled.